This one is a special presentation because we have a guest from Dropbox who will be joining us. Her name is Carola, and she calls herself an advocate of accessibility. And I think what interests me the most about her presentation this evening is she covers a full gamut of topics. So when we think of accessibility, we think of visual impairments, maybe dyslexia. But she, not to be a spoiler, but she even gets into things like anxiety and how that affects people using digital products. So without further ado, let me present to everyone Carola.
I'm going to start by apologizing because I have a very bad cough. So you're probably going to hear a lot of it. But I've got my water here, so I should be fine. All right, so we're going to talk about accessibility and design. It's a little bit of a different lens than what people usually talk about when we talk about accessibility, since we're not going to focus on anything code related or ARIA labels or anything too deeply technical. So I hope that some of you are designers and are going to be able to follow. But I wanted to start with something about me and just telling you who I am. So my name is Carola, and I'm a product designer at Dropbox right now, where I've been for a little bit over 10 months. But I want to take you through a little bit of my journey and how and why I define myself as a accessibility advocate. I was telling Chris just earlier that I'm in no way a specialist. An accessibility specialist is someone that actually knows how to fix the accessibility problems in code, and I don't. I'm just a very strong advocate. I try to just remind people that accessibility is a thing and that you have to make sure your designs account for it. And I've just gone through a little bit of a experience through my previous jobs that gave me this knowledge. And so let's go through it together. I studied in Italy, and I studied business, which doesn't make any sense for a designer, I guess. But while I was in college, I was with this couple of friends that were very deep into machine learning and deep learning, computer vision, and they had an idea for a product that would help blind people and visually impaired people hear what they couldn't see. And so this was a device that through cameras and deep learning and computer vision would describe the world around them through bone conduction device. So imagine it kind of like a pair of headphones that is a little smarter. It was called Horus, and it was a great adventure. We started this company, I guess. It wasn't even a company. And we started creating prototypes of this product and trying to find product market fit. I ended up doing a lot of the marketing side, business side, and a lot of the design, branding type of work. Together with some of the product software design was my first approach to digital design. And I just found it incredibly interesting. I was just so young and so naive. I had no idea that how do visually impaired people navigate the world. I had just literally no clue. And so we ran into all sorts of problems, like giving our business cards and people not being able to read them because we didn't have braille on them. And all sorts of problems that really, I don't know, they fascinated me a lot. And I started understanding that I like solving problems, and especially these kind of problems that no one really thinks about were super interesting to me. And so this startup thing went on for a little bit, and I became very passionate about it. After a while, I decided that actually the design part was very interesting, and so I wanted to move to here, San Francisco and Silicon Valley in general, because I was just so passionate about innovation and technology and design. And so what other place should I go to if not here? And that's where I came to a design agency based in Oakland called Vertical, whose biggest client is the Department of Veteran Affairs. So they welcomed me and took a bit of a risk, because I wasn't a real designer yet. And so I started to get my hands dirty with designing apps for the Veteran Affairs. It's kind of a big feat. We were working especially with the department that works with PTSD. And so most of our apps were had to be 100% compliant with Section 508, which is just one of the standards that you can follow for accessibility. The most common one is the WCAG 2.1. And so during that experience, I had to design countless number of UIs. We were just shipping out products, and they all had to be super compliant. So thanks to actually the client that was very, very strict. It's a governmental agency. You can't really fuck it up. I learned a ton. I learned so much through tons of mistakes. And after 2.5 years of just, again, getting my hands dirty with accessibility, I kind of became, I realized I knew quite a bit about it. And that maybe it's not so normal or common to know that much about accessibility. And so I started becoming more of an advocate and talking about it with other people and realizing that it's kind of a valuable thing. People sometimes don't know about it, so it's helpful to know. After the agency experience, I moved to TaskRabbit, which is in the city, and the product itself doesn't have really anything to do with accessibility, but this passion of mine kept growing. And so, again, not a specialist, but an advocate. I've tried within the company to, let's say, push where I could. And I found myself in that position where designers want to find themselves, where the company's brand main color is a non-accessible green that doesn't work on white, and the contrast ratio is never going to work. And so any product you design in that company is not going to be accessible. It's not it, yeah. But there are things that you can do. You can push for a change in that color. You can push for small other tweaks that are not about the contrast ratio. You can still have an impact. And so what I did at TaskRabbit, I grouped with this other developer, and we created this accessibility guild where we would huddle every once in a while and just define what we wanted to tackle. And there were usually very small things. Like, I saw that this link doesn't have a description, or that this image doesn't have alt text, or we decided to change that very green just for links, because that very light green on white on a link that is very thin and small is not readable, even by a sighted person. And so there are still things you can do, even if you feel like you're blocked and there's no accessibility team in your company. You can still find someone else that is passionate about it. Let me see what do I have next. Forget. A blank screen. Oh, yeah, you might ask, excuse me, what is accessibility? I thought it might be worth just explaining it a little bit. A lot of people hear this word and it's been used a lot lately. But what it really means is to just give the ability to everyone to, regardless, of their condition, whether they can see, they can hear, or whatever other condition they might have, to access something. And it is generally used in our world, in the design industry, as making web or digital interfaces accessible to people with disabilities. I think the last part, to people with disabilities, is the part that people don't really understand and underestimate. Because you might think, there's not a ton. You don't see them on the street too much. But I'm going to take you through an exercise today where you're going to realize that I bet that in the room we have some people with disabilities. It's just common, and we can all be. Imagine you have two bags. You're holding two bags. You can't use your phone. You have to use one finger or your nose. You're disabled in that moment. So I like this presentation because it's very, very practical. So I'm not going to go into too deep, because you can Google it yourself. You can find tons of descriptions of what accessibility means. I want you to learn with me and just identify some examples of non-accessible products. So the way I don't want to have screenshots of other products and make this a who doesn't have accessibility type of game. Oh, hi, Koi. Sorry, this is my dog, and I knew you would come. Okay. All right. Yeah, sorry. This happens all the time. All right, so this game, yeah, I know, it's funny. I don't think I've ever given a presentation to the dog. But all right, so I'm gonna take you through 6 examples of, in this case, disabilities and how they could manifest and how they could see and experience websites that are not accessible. I used designs that are not Dropbox designs. They use the same components, but just big disclaimer, Dropbox is not like this. I just purposely made it bad. And so that's why I'm not going to send out the presentation, because I don't know if I can share a worsened design of the place where I work. So I'm going to start with this. You'll see I'm going to use icons, and this one represents visual disabilities. And so this is an example of what a website would look, and you're going to have to find the mistakes. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds. But imagine you're someone with visual disability. What doesn't work, and what could confuse you? What could be wrong with this screenshot? So raise your hand when you have something. Go on.
Color on the file.
On the file, like
Purple
the
one.
metadata. Okay, yeah. The purple folder.
If you were colorblind, you would be able to tell.
Perfect. So repeating just for online, the color of the folder, you could discern the purple from the blue. Yeah, that's the one.
The color on the dot on the file?
The color on the dot, similar problem. There's only color to distinguish the gray dot from the green dot. And again, if you're colorblind, they might look very similar. You had another one?
Oh, no,
Oh, same. All right.
The icon for upload files and upload folder are very the boxy. They're boxing, so they're similar.
Yeah, that could definitely be one. Some other examples. Oh, you got one. Yeah.
Photos have color.
Folders have. Sorry.
Photos.
The
Yeah.
profile photos.
Yep. Anything else? Got another one.
Yeah, is it contrast ratio on the text just
Exactly.
to light against the background?
So that's usually one of the most commonly known, I guess, by designers, the contrast ratio of text against a white background or whatever background you have. In this case, the top labels and the metadata on the side are not accessible. And another thing that might look accessible, and that you see a lot on websites today because we all love bright colors and white labels, that blue with the create button, although you might be able to read it, it's not very, it doesn't have high contrast. If you have a small screen with just poor contrast itself, like your display is not a Mac Retina display, you're gonna have a hard time reading that. And so the way I try to work this is that I'm gonna show you what it should look like. And so you'll see that some of the differences are that the folders, like what you guys were saying, have icons to also differentiate the purple main one from the other blue ones, so that if you're not able to see purple, you can see it through the icon that that folder has something different about it. Similarly, with the sync status, we don't really have sync status on web, so I really mocked it up. It's not a feature, it doesn't exist. But you'll see that this one has a little bit of a cloud icon saying that this is not a local file. Instead, the green dot has a check mark telling you that it's synced locally. And the button has a darker blue that is part of our blues and we can use. And the text links are also slightly darker, just enough to be accessible. So you'll see that accessible design is not worse, it's usually better. Let's move on to the second one. So this is not necessarily a disability, but a way you might experience a website, and it is through a screen reader. And so screen readers see our websites in a different way. Not just like we see them, they have to read through all of it. So you guys tell me here, what do you think could be hard for someone using a screen reader? And take your time to rush it.
Now the icons that are that would have been like upload document or etc. They don't have labels anymore, so they can't be read.
So the icons don't have labels anymore, so they can't be read.
The fact that it's a table, so going across would be difficult to remember which column.
Yeah, so tables can be very tricky with screen readers.
There's 2 icons. You know those 4 icons right there. There's 2 on the website.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same.
Yep. The 2 of the icons look kind of the same. So if they don't have descriptions, it's going to be hard.
For the profiles, they should have names.
Yes, that's a very good one. Profiles should read names if there's a screen reader reading them and not just read image.
There should also be like a navigation heading for people to navigate through, because if they were to do this linearly, they'll have to go through all the entire.
Yes,
list
that's a very good one. So that's usually the one that people have a little bit of a harder time understanding, and it's the navigation tree. So you'll see that one of the consequences of not having a clear navigation tree could be that you have to go through your whole list of files before you go and get to the search bar. Clearly not helping people that have to navigate with a keyboard or a screen reader, because they're going to have to go through hundreds of files before using a feature that literally saves you from going through hundreds of files. Another one that wasn't mentioned was the get started and the description of the get started being after the button. So trying to be very explicit with your call to actions. I know we can be tempted as designers to have like a quirky call to action with like a joke in it or something like that. But this is just, my opinion. I feel like there are other places in the UI where it can be fun, and the call to action should be as straightforward as possible. I guess you guys got them all. So yeah, icons are not necessarily a problem. Not having the label is not necessarily a problem for screen readers, as long as you and your developer make sure that it has alt text that describes the action that that icon is going to perform. Same with the avatars. As long as there's some description that the screen reader can read to describe that that is a user and what user that is, that should be fine. All right, next one. So this is, yeah, pretty clearly how it should be. Like the biggest thing is you see searches at the top. So navigating with your screen reader, you're going to go through search first. And then if you don't care about search, you can go down to the files. All right, now we're going to talk about cognitive disabilities and how these could affect the way you read a website. Okay, so this is a little bit more apparent, but go for it.
With the different upload options, you got a lot of unnecessary text.
Yes, a lot of unnecessary text in your call to actions. What else do you see?
The CTA looks disabled.
Yes, the CTA is not communicating that it's enabled, because some designer here chose a very dark shade of gray, thinking that it doesn't look disabled, but it doesn't look disabled.
The names of the folders and the title of the page look like they're links, but they're in fact links.
Yes. So the names of the folders are blue and look like links. And this actually happened to me where someone once wanted that for consistency, and I'm all for consistency, that all clickable things should look like a link. And what you have as a result is that you're asking the user a lot of things in the screen. Like their attention is like everywhere. No, click here. No, click all of these first. And no, click on the side. And then the actual thing that you want them to click is not blue. And so where I'm trying to get at is that if you have a cognitive disability, you're going to be confused by the screen. And even if you don't have a cognitive disability, good design should also help people that don't have disabilities. But if you do, this is going to be incredibly hard for you. I'm just going to have a very hard time understanding what I can click on and what I should click on. So I guess, again, you guys got them all. So very good folks here, very good people. Yeah, this is what it would look like, pretty much the same as before. Some of the ones that I'm going to show you as the correct version are now kind of being the same. We're going to see it. But yeah, this is usually forgotten by people. But hopefully if you practice good design, some of these things should not be a problem. Let's go to the next one. And it's not gaming, it's motor disabilities. So imagine you have a grandma with very big fingers, or you might not even be able to use a mouse. And so this could vary depending on the type of disability, but the way you solve it is very similar. And so this is an example, and the red lines, I'm not just trying to make you look at something. It's supposed to mean something, so let me know if you find anything. Sorry.
Is that your clickable area?
Clickable area, yes. That represents the clickable area, and you see that it's very tiny. Another one?
Search is hidden way down in the corner.
Yes, search is hidden within the corner, yes. Why do you think it's a problem?
Hard to discover if it's not.
Yes. It's hard to discover. Anything else? Yes, and this is especially, so with the search at the bottom, you have to search and then you have to go all the way back up to see the results. And this is especially a problem, not only for screen readers, like you mentioned earlier, but even if you're navigating with a keyboard or a clicker, you might not use a mouse. And so if things are not in the proper IA order, you're gonna have just a very, very hard time. Someone might have thought it's just a cool idea to place a create button at the end, bottom right corner of your endless list of emails. But then if you can't get to that create, it's hard. This is a real problem that people have with floating action buttons if they forget the accessibility problem. The other circle around Michelle Wallace's folder is to exemplify that not only the click area needs to be big, but don't mess with your focus states. Focus states have a very standard type of layout so that people can recognize that they're a focus state. And they're usually this glowy blue ring that is around the object that you're trying to click on. And yeah, just make sure you don't try to get too fancy with them, because then they become hard to recognize. Not saying that you shouldn't do anything. You can still do something, but try not to diverge too much. Small targets, yes. Imagine you're browsing this with your phone, and this website doesn't have a mobile app or a mobile version. You want to be able to click on that click target. And even if you have your hands shake a lot, even with your mouse, it's going to be hard to click a small target. So make sure your click targets are at least 48 by 48. If you really have to go smaller, 32 by 32. But yeah, the bigger the better. Okay, last two, and then I'm almost done. This is dyslexia. So not many people consider it a disability per se, because you can kind of go on with your life without too much devices to help you go on with your life, so it's kind of invisible. But it can be really hard to read websites that have weird layouts and that try to be a little bit too avant-garde sometimes. because you need dividers and stuff like that. So apart from dividers, which I spoiled, what else do you see?
Everything's all lowercase.
Yes, everything's lowercase.
The kerning on the letters is pretty tight, so it's
Kerning is
get
tight.
very confused.
Hard to read, yep.
What's the issue with the lowercase letters?
Lowercase letters, the issue is not necessarily the fact that they're lowercase. It's you have to make sure you use your capital letters where you need to. So when a word has a capital letter, use it. It helps people understand where a sentence starts and ends, like you would imagine. But if you don't have them and you're trying to, again, some websites do, they want to have everything lower cap. It's really hard for someone to understand what's the first letter. If you mix up, I don't know if you've ever seen that. I'm going to show a resource later to mock up what a website would look like to someone that is dyslexic. And you tend to mix up the letters in the center of the word, or sometimes even at the end. But if you have the capital letters, that's an anchor point when you're trying to read through something. What else do you see here? Oh, lots of hands. Sorry. Go there.
There's no icons or anything for the file, the upload files, and then also the lack of pictures for the footer.
Yes, perfect. So lack of icons on the 4 call to actions. And I would take that a step forward. You'll see that the words are very similar in those 4 buttons or links. And I personally don't really understand what the differences are. And imagine someone that may read upload, upload, files, files, folder, folder. The only 2 different words are deleted and history. Everything else repeats and makes it really hard for me to understand what action I'm taking.
The files have some sort of tiny text on them.
Yes,
The icons are not text.
yes. I wonder if that was just me trying to make the icon smaller and the icon to fit. I don't know. I don't remember. Sorry? Yes, second column is empty, and so it doesn't help you connect the name of the folder to the metadata, which is actually at the very end. And this goes back to dividers. If you have a hard time reading, having a divider between each line, it's really gonna help you out. Some more?
The icon for Michelle Wallace is the same as all the other ones, so you don't really know why that's going first when everything else is alphabetical.
Yes, and I think you're getting the thing that I forgot. The reason why I changed the icons to words and changed the color is if you don't have dividers and you have the same color, but then you have a difference in the icon, is a little bit harder because it's not a visual thing and you have to read. And it's very tiny, so okay, just a little hard. I think you got them all. Oh no, the numbers, sorry, spoiling it again. But 4 out of 19 active, someone mentioned not having the avatars. It's not only, excuse me, not only not having the avatars, but there are types of dyslexia that work worse with numbers than letters. And just use visuals whenever you can. Try not to have a bunch of numbers there without a unit, without anything. They can really mean nothing to some users. And you got them all, guys. Again, very good. Oh, line height, I was forgetting. Yeah, make sure, again, I know that sometimes it's pretty to play with line height and make things like very, very like close to each other. But line height is a good way, if you don't have dividers, to help people understand and read better, so that the word above it doesn't mix with the word below it. Yeah. And again, same old. Last one. And then I'm going to be showing some resources. All right. This one is something that is very dear to me, and it's about something that people don't talk a lot about when they talk about accessibility, and it's mental disabilities. And these could show up in many different forms. Some of the things that I'm going to touch on here are anxiety and possibly depression, but mostly anxiety. It's way more diffuse than you think. It's in way more people than you would imagine. And so tell me what is wrong with this website. This is probably the one that is craziest. So. Exclamation point for start. Yeah, we got all of that. Marketing folder deleted, and the time, the numbers, somewhere.
Yeah, maybe the 3 dots under the add folder.
Yes, the 3 dots under add folders. I'm going to tell you why a little in a second. Something else? Yeah.
There's like a menu, like 3-bar menu icon, then under that it's also like 3 dots.
Yeah, so that's a context menu and you don't have visibility on it. Yeah.
Talk about that now.
Yes. Yes, I know. Even just looking at this. You know, okay, I'm just gonna go through all of them and explain. So the reason why I put this down at the bottom is to show a few things. One is, imagine you're an intern and in your Dropbox you accidentally delete the marketing folder for your whole company. And you have 2 seconds until that's actually final, and you have no undo button. And someone is making fun of you because they're using a progress bar as a countdown. And there's a big red icon because it's a delete action. So of course you use a big red icon. And to the 3 dots of before, if you've noticed, the other 2 actions that are missing that were there in previous designs were how to recover a deleted folder. And guess what? It's under a context menu because it's not something that people click on a lot. I mean, you guys got them all again. But I suggest always having an undo when you have a critical action, a deleting action especially. Give someone more than 2 seconds to realize that they made a mistake. And please, please, please don't use progress bar for something that is not progress. I've run into this myself. I was trying to, you know when you undo something and then like on Gmail, you have like a few seconds to like undo. I was trying to be cool and use that and then add like a time, because I want to tell the user how much they have. I thought it was a good thing. I showed it to some people and they were all like panicking. Oh my God, I only have 5 seconds. Well, usually if you don't even show it, 5 seconds is quite a lot. So yeah, just always have the reverse of the action if it's a deletable action. And try not to hide actions that could actually help the user. Even though they're not your most clicked call to action, when you need them the most, they need to be easily retrievable. And so just something to keep in mind if you're designing something like this. Let me see, let me read my notes. Time-sensitive, no undo, I should delete it. Icon text mismatch. Icon text mismatch, I can spend a little more time there. This is more of a confirmation screen, actually snack bar. So try to send the same message. In this case, the icon is sending a do not access kind of message, which is negative by itself. And the message is kind of like, yes, confirming you deleted. So don't create stress or anxiety because the other person might not understand, wait, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Should I undo? Maybe I should undo. Yeah. So that's it. These are the examples. Oh, wait, the exclamation point that you said, just want to touch on that a little bit further. We all have enough anxiety and stress outside of when we are trying to do something on the web in real life. So again, with your call to actions and your labels, try to be as descriptive and clear as possible. Try to not make me think and worry and guess about what happens after I click start. because then I'm not going to click it. So it's also good practice for girls that in general, good design and good product thinking. Have tell the user what happens when they click on something. So these are the examples I had, and I have a good set for you because you made it, and so I have a little bit of a reward. Some useful resources that you might want to look at are some contrast analyzers. There's a bunch out there. If you use Sketch, you can use the first one. It's called Color Contrast Analyzer, and it's a plugin. It's the first thing that comes up when you Google it. So all of these, like you Google the name, and you're gonna kind of find it. The second one is something, if you like me use Figma or other products that don't have necessarily plugins, you can still download an app on your computer and have that be a universal contrast checker with just some eyedropper tool, and it measures and tells you what standards it follows. You'll see that they say AA passed, AAA passed. That's where I want you to go and look at accessibility standards. Look at BCAG 2.1 it's just the most common standard on web. To just know the nitty-gritty, like what's the amount of contrast ratio that I should have for this element. That would take me a full 2 hours of talk, and it's not really that fun. So the last one is also very interesting because it works on Windows. So it works across platform, it's very powerful. Then I have, this is really nice, it's a simulator, and this really opened my eyes to how people might experience the web. It's a Chrome plugin that simulates various disabilities. And you can see your mouse move, like if you select trembling tremor, your cursor just moves a lot. And so you can test if your tap targets or click targets are big enough. You can see different types of dyslexia, or even different types of color blindness. Stay down, what's going on? I got you. And then, yeah, there's just a ton of examples. Download it. I think it's you have to pay eventually, but there's like a free 7-day where you can just have fun with it and try to empathize a little bit with your users. And this is something that we have printed, and it's just there in our area of the office. Just Google gov.uk accessibility posters. They have a GitHub link with all these posters. They touch on many of the points that I touched tonight, and they have just very clear examples of do's and don'ts. And it's a very effortless way for you to become an advocate. So you have a design team around you, just go like a ninja at night and put these on the wall. Some people are gonna notice it and just learn something. So it's free, it's good. That's all I have. So thank you for listening and going through all of this with me. Questions, of course.
Hey,
Hello.
that was really great. I enjoyed it a lot. So color contrast ratio is 4.5 to 1, and I have no idea what that means or how to explain it to other people. How do you do it, or
Yeah, so going deep into what it means technically is a little harder, but you can use these tools to check what it is that you're designing and seeing what the contrast ratio is for yours, so that even if you don't know technically what it means, like that this color, then you do a bit of calculations, quite a bit of calculations, gets you to this number. You don't need to know how you get to that number, but there are a lot of tools where you can test your contrast ratio. And one thing to keep in mind is that 4.5 is the highest standard of contrast ratio if you want to be compliant with AAA levels. If your text is big enough, you might get away with 3.2, which is just a little less contrasty. But usually a good rule of thumb is if you have a dark color over a light color, you're going to be fine. The problems start to arise when you use greens, which are usually very light in terms of contrast. because then they become otherwise like a forest green. Yellows are almost impossible to use because they become brown when you make them darker. Blues, so-so. Sometimes if it's too bright, it's not accessible. But it's a lot of trial and error. If you have one of these plugins, the Sketch one, for example, is you just select the 2 layers and then hit a shortcut, and it's just gonna tell you. So it's just very easy to check. How do you tell it to other people? It really depends if they know what accessibility is and if they have to work with something like that. If they don't, you don't need to get into the details of the numbers. You can just say, look, I had to change this because this is not readable by people that don't have the same vision that we have. So when you have to get into the details, you're might gonna have to learn like the actual calculations, but I've never had to learn it. People care and trust you.
Thanks, I'll avoid that.
Do you have any ways to help your stakeholders understand the importance of accessibility other than to threaten them with the legal aspects of accessibility?
Threats are usually what works best. Yeah. No, I mean, it is true that that's usually what works best. If you have something like someone higher up in the organization that cares about it, is usually the most effective way. If there's a push from above and they're like maybe staffing the team, that's usually when most things like get done. At Dropbox, we're in a similar stage right now where they hired a bunch of people and we're just focusing on it finally, and we're just cranking at it and fixing so many bugs in just a very short time. So I would say is the most powerful thing. But if you're like trying to have a grassroots type of influence, what I try to do, I try to, be kind of a ninja a little bit and like try to sprinkle it. I have a few friends in the organization that I know are advocates. And so what we're trying to do is each in its own organizing, like maybe during our team bi-weekly meeting, trying to like reserve 15 minutes for a accessibility presentation. And I show something like this where they try to learn and understand what it means. At least that's on the design side. With developers, it's a little different. I've always been very lucky that there's always been one or two that really cared, whether it was for personal reasons or they knew someone that cared, and so they care for proxy. I guess the suggestion would be find those people that care and try to create a tag team. And so that way you can try to use maybe your all hands if it's a small company and try to just make people more aware, and then people are going to come to you with questions after you show that you are an advocate for this, and the word is just going to spread. You keep talking about it, you keep showing it to people, eventually people are going to care.
So I hear that there are some legal issues that are starting to arise where people are getting sued for sites not being accessible. So are there some kind of guidelines that people should actually follow? Are there some certifications? Are there some checklists? What is the place where we can go and fall back and say, yes, I've met all the criteria?
Yeah, so too bad that I forgot to put it in the resources, but it's the most important resource of all. And it's called WCAG, and it's WCAG. It's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And in the past years, they just recently shipped a new version 2.1 that was very highly expected. And it's a bit of a complicated website, but online there's a plethora of resources. If you check like some quick ways to make my website accessible. You're not going to make your website accessible in 5 steps, but it's a good start. And it's not one of those things that you have to have 100% of it, unless you're working for a government agency or like your county website or things like this. If you're a consumer product or a business product, even if you do 20% of it, it's better than doing nothing. So if you are at 0%, give it a try with the checklist that you find online. Just, I don't know, 5 steps to accessibility. I hate those blogs, but they actually, like if you don't have anything, they're better than nothing. Once you have that, then you can start like trying to improve it. But no one, like really no one, even the apps that we were developing, and no one gets to 100% because these things keep changing. And even the biggest companies have huge efforts on accessibility, like Facebook and Instagram are doing an amazing job. Still, you're not 100%. So don't make it block you if you're not going to be able to advocate for a different green for your company as the main color. You can still do other things. You can still make sure that all your designers at the company, for example, know about accessibility so that it's not a responsibility that is only yours. You can share it. Similarly, on the engineering side. So find whatever you can, go on that website and read it until you get tired of it because it's very, very long. But there's anything that you can do from there is better than nothing.
So are there certifications that people are giving out?
Certifications?
I see some
Oh, I'm sure.
websites that say
Yeah.
that we certify you, will charge you $100 a year or whatever.
I'm sure there's certification. I've never investigated whether there is one. I'm sure that on the engineering side is even more popular because it's an actual like skill and type of knowledge that takes a little bit to acquire. On the design side, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, I'm sure that there's some certifications out there.
Have you ever run into issues where accessibility for one group interferes with accessibility for another? And how do you prioritize those situations?
Yeah, I don't run into it that often, but I have for sure. Usually I just follow my same framework that I use for other problems. I try to understand, I try to not over-index over something that is maybe very, very marginal. We're talking about minorities in general, and it's a minority of users, and you're focusing on that, it's already something. And if they're conflicting, it's hard, but I try to understand who of my users do I know? Do I have any type of data that tells me I have more people that use screen readers and keyboard navigation than other types of problems that I'm trying to solve? And it's just a trade-off sometimes. I bet that if you spend enough time thinking through solution, you might find a solution that works for both, but we don't always have that luxury. So I would just go with your same process that you use for any other thing that you prioritize. I generally try to look for data first and then try to understand the gravity of the problem that I'm solving. Maybe a good example is the contrast ratio. Maybe I'm already almost there. I'm not there like to 4.5 yet, but maybe I'm 4.1. And so I'm going to focus on something else that is, again, at 0%, and I have to take it up at least 50%. So that's how I usually go about it.
Let's give Carola a round of applause. I'm sure